under the Labour government, just recently they've been passing just absolutely diabolical anti-protest laws,
such as
so one of the ones that they're bringing in, it should go into force in a couple of months, is something against what they call cumulative disruption.
Okay.
Now this basically means that the law is that a police officer can designate a certain area as a protest as a protest zone.
Right. Yeah.
And then if there are too many protests within that zone, the police basically get the opportunity to say, actually, you're not allowed to protest.
Too many protests or protesters?
Protests.
Right.
So
so you could theoretically, if you disagree with a protest that's going on, you could start your own protest and then get the whole thing shut down.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, so this is what we call first come, first serve free speech. No protocol was followed at all, basically.
Meaning?
So they brought in, they introduced the idea of a ban at the very last stage of a bill, which is usually it's a massive faux pas. You can technically do it, but people just don't.
What do they call it? Is it gerrymandering in the US? I don't know if there's a different word here.
Maybe. I actually don't know the
gerrymandering.
I know that.
I forget which one it is. Gerrymandering is either when you sort of try to change the counties, sort of like the borders of counties, so that you can get more people of a certain.
Isn't that redlining? No, redlining is the I think that's the one with where they change the borders according to people's races or something. That's another US.
I can't remember if it's gerrymandering. I think gerrymandering is the one where they basically, what they'll do is in America, where they'll make like a really long bill with loads of stuff on it. So they want to get like one thing through, and they're like, right, if you get this thing through, then we're going to put loads of other things through. So the government, for example, Trump wants to get rid of like public land, and he wants to open it up to drilling in certain areas like Alaska, where it's been protected for a long time. And then what they'll do is the Democrats don't want that because they don't like it, but then they'll be like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put in loads of left-wing policies as well in the same bill, so that we pass this massive sweeping thing.
Oh, yeah.
So that was what the big beautiful bill was that everyone was talking about, was like, we're going to do this, but we're also going to chuck in loads of other stuff, and nobody at the end of the day knows what it actually is.
Yeah. And I think in the UK they call it a Christmas tree bill.
A Christmas tree
where everybody hangs on their little little amendments,
right.
And they kind of you get this giant overstuffed. Well, that's not quite what happened. It's more like so this was the Children's Wellbeing in Schools bill, which was sort of quite a regular standard bill about like school uniforms and like children in care and just kind of children's stuff. And then right at you have all these different stages, and this goes over the course of a few months. And then right at the very last stage, the stage at which all the stuff that has been discussed over the last few months finally gets voted on, at that point, basically the Tory peer Lord Nash introduced this idea of a social media ban. So the polite thing to do would have been to introduce it much earlier, so that everybody could have discussed it and it would have had proper scrutiny. But instead he just went, nope, we're going to do it right now. So that gave organizations like us almost no time to think about a strategy or coordinate or
it really feels, I was talking about this last night, it really feels like what they've done is there was that big what was the word, not protest, what is it called when you have that, I'm still waking up this morning, forgive me.
That's fine.
It was the petition is the word I'm looking for. There was the big petition that people didn't want digital ID in the UK, and that kind of got shot down, and that was a lot of your guys' work as well. And it kind of feels like they were already talking about the under 16s ban, but what people don't realize is, even though some people are happy with it because they're like, oh, social media is bad for you, we should ban it for under 16s, it feels like they kind of just snuck it in again anyway.
Absolutely.
Which is what Keir Starmer said. He went, we're going to sneak this in again. And people didn't realize that he did sneak it in again already. They think it's still like coming under another digital ID thing, but it's come under a social media ban.
Well, that's what's frustrating as well. It's very it's very easy to campaign about this and to kind of feel like, I often feel like we sound very conspiratorial when we're saying like, well, a social media ban would mean digital IDs, but like it just does.
It is.
Like it just, that's just what it means.
Yeah. Well, because I was explaining it again to my partner last night, and it's that thing where it's like, okay, well, how are you going to enforce people under 16 not being able to go on Instagram? You need to give everyone a digital ID so that they can log in online and prove that they are under or over 16. Yeah, and there was that thing recently. If you wouldn't mind talking about it, we are here. Thank you. I should say thank you for joining me. I'm
Yeah,
very
thanks for
glad
having
you're
me.
here. I was very excited about this conversation. Usually, I'm a little bit nervous, but because I'd met you before and I was like, I'm quite keen on this subject and it's all quite relevant, I was very excited. Can you explain the biobank situation that's just happened to people for people who don't know?
Yeah, so basically, in put sort of very short, so biobank is a landmark sort of scientific database that is used for medical research. Lots of volunteers join, and they'll do studies.
Right.
And so obviously, as you can imagine, there's lots of medical details in as part of that project, and these include just things like measurements or height measurements, weight measurements, stuff like that.
I saw online when I tried to look. It's like when you try to look up like a weapons company, and they're like, "Oh, we're a modern company helping with modern solutions," and they don't really give an answer. All I could see was that they said they were sort of a modern experiment in health. And so I didn't know what it was. It's all volunteer based. It's not like a private healthcare situation.
So it's all volunteer based, and
Okay.
basically it's a big database of research.
So do people know? Is it part of the NHS?
Not that I know of, actually. I'm not sure. I do know that
I'm
it's.
just wondering how people how do people get their health onto it? Like,
They volunteer. So basically, if
Okay.
you want to be part of a study, like let's say you have a particular condition, and scientists say we want to research people who have this condition.
Right.
You then volunteer. So people's data is on there voluntarily. But the scary thing was that data as sensitive as like DNA sequences and stuff like that, basically it got leaked,
Right.
and it was found for sale on like the Chinese internet.
Yeah, it was hacked by Chinese hackers, and now it's for sale for everyone, which is
Yeah.
happening all over the place.
Yeah, like this is not like a rare occurrence or anything like that. I think it's just because it's health data, it's even more sensitive, and I think it's a good example of how basically anytime you gather any kind of data, there is a risk that data gets leaked. And a company, of course, can say that they store the data very safely. I actually personally believe that biobank, there were lots of people there who did try to store the data safely, and that it wasn't. I don't know the details of the situation, but I don't think that they kind of put it up for sale.
No, I mean, it's just been happening since the beginning of time, hasn't
Yeah,
it? Like
it's
there's
just-
whole countries in Africa where all they can do is try to hack into your emails and scam you and do stuff. And now it's just getting worse because now AI is going to...
Yeah.
I don't remember where I heard this. I heard this recently, that apparently AI is going to make it so that you have no more privacy in about a year's time because it's so good at hacking encrypted things, and it gets better with every evolution. And now you've got different countries making their own versions and getting better and better every day and training based on previous AIs, that it's going to get to the point where any private information that you have in your phone isn't going to be private anymore.
Yeah.
So any messages from 10 years ago or any pictures that you have that you don't want publicly seen, you have to get rid of them now, because it's going to make it so much easier to get rid of. So it's not even Chinese hackers anymore. It's just people who don't know anything about coding, just using an AI to hack into your phone from a different country, which is terrifying if we're going to now have digital ID and passports and health information and all of these things online.
Yeah, I mean, what's really scary about that as well is that you'd think that with the sort of the rapidly increasing or the rapid increase in technology that allows for these kinds of hacks, you'd think that the government would double down on stuff like encryption and double down on cybersecurity and double down on making sure that people's data is safe. You'd expect the same from like large platforms and companies, but we're actually seeing the exact opposite. So rather than recognizing that encryption is this really fundamental thing that is so important to keeping people safe, basically people have just governments have reframed encryption as this evil thing, and it's this idea of like if you have something to hide, then you must be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that like encryption is the way that you hide stuff from the bad guys. It goes both ways.
Yeah, they're one of my favorite things to see. I've always said if I wasn't going to be an actor, I would do white collar crime, because the people who do white collar crime, they're really clever. They get away with it for a really long time. And then when they get caught, they don't go to prison. They turn around and some intelligence agency goes, "Do you want to work with us to stop people doing what you did?" And you go, "Yeah." It happens all the time. It was I can't remember his name, but the guy from The Wolf of Wall Street, that's what he did.
The Jordan Belfort.
Jordan Belfort,
Yeah.
yeah. And then, funnily enough, a different guy, but played by Leonardo DiCaprio. It was in the film Catch Me If You Can, and he played a con man, and Tom Hanks was always trying to run around and catch him. He also got away with it for ages, and then he finally caught him in the act doing whatever he was doing, and then eventually he went on to help intelligence agencies afterwards. So it's really fun when you watch people. There's like people at banks who their whole job is to sit there all day and try to crack into the bank that they work for.
Yeah, I think it's called ethical hacking. I
Yeah,
think is the discipline. Yeah.
Which is like, if you're a coder, I think that's a really fun job. I think it's probably going to be another job that goes away with AI shortly, because you can just have 1,000 AIs trying to crack into the bank every minute of every day.
Yeah.
There's I saw it the other day, they call them dark factories in China now. Have you seen this? Where it's like car factories or like Amazon warehouses, but basically they're called dark factories because there's no people there anymore. So it's all entirely run by AI.
That's such a sort of dystopian
Yeah.
image.
So you're watching like
empty warehouse.
It's like 3:00 in the morning, and the robots are still just making cars, and they don't need any lights, because the robots don't need any lights. It's like an assembly line for cars, and they just sort of plug their bit on, but you don't need people anymore.
Weird.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
It's weird. I mean, for car assembly, I think like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But when it starts to encroach into other fields where sort of you
entertainment,
yeah,
where
it would be good to have some kind of human oversight. That's when it starts to get very scary.
Yeah, you were talking a little bit there about like companies that are now starting to remove encryption. I saw that Meta is removing things on WhatsApp, right? It's
on Instagram DMs. Yeah. Right. So basically, as of the, I think it's the 8th of May, so that's in about a week, all Instagram DMs will no longer be end-to-end encrypted. I mean, there's the little caveat there is that they weren't end-to-end encrypted by default. So it was an opt-in option.
Okay.
And basically Meta's justification for this was that not enough people opted in. Well, what I would say is that if you hide a feature deep down in the preferences menu, then of course people aren't going to opt in. So they really should have designed it in a better way.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's always the thing where, like, if you're being perfectly honest with yourself, we haven't had privacy in our messages between each other or social media for ages, because there was the whole Snowden NSA thing that they found out, and that wasn't just an America thing, that was a worldwide thing. And now it just feels like, because everyone kind of knows that, they've sort of done a slow, like a soft launch of being like, yeah, we've always been spying on you, we've always been, and then there's people who go, well, like, if you're not doing anything bad, they're not going to check on you. And then there's examples of employees in certain companies like Meta that are just spying on people's like nude messages to each other just because they can.
Yeah.
And now it's the thing where they're not even being dishonest about it. They're just coming out and being like, this isn't going to be a thing anymore.
Yeah, well, it's also important to realize that obviously if Meta all of a sudden have access to, let's say only 10% of people actually use the encrypted function. I don't know what the exact number is, but let's say it's 10%. That's millions of people still. So if you de-encrypt those people's messages, all of a sudden you have millions more messages, or billions more messages that you can then use to train AI,
right.
and to use for targeted advertising. So especially if you look at all of the Meta platforms that exist, Instagram's actually the one where they generate the most advertising revenue. So it's no coincidence that they decided to remove end-to-end encryption from that platform specifically.
Right.
And they have said, like, well, if you want to use end-to-end messaging, use WhatsApp. And like, yeah, like you can. Also, like at Big Brother Watch, we always advocate for everybody using encrypted services where they can. Signal is really the gold standard.
See, I've heard this, but then I've heard that Signal's not actually, it is encrypted, but it doesn't really work. I've heard that if people want to get into your messages, they can.
Well, I think so this is too technical for me to actually discuss. I do legal and policy.
No,
so
I haven't actually used Signal. The only example I have was Tucker Carlson famously interviewed Vladimir Putin. A lot of people were upset about that, and he was using Signal to do this because he thought it was encrypted and it was fine. And then he found out basically the US government told him that they knew where he was going before he went there because they'd hacked into his Signal account.
Would that be Telegram? Maybe it could. Is that the confusion? Because
I think it was Signal.
Oh, okay, interesting. Because I do know that Telegram is one of those services that is allegedly very sort of encrypted and safe,
yeah,
but just isn't.
Yeah.
I know that I think it's the Ukrainian military hacked into the Russian Telegram channels very easily.
Yeah.
and we're just in their group chats and things like that. So it's a whole different level of war.
Yeah, and I imagine with an organization like Big Brother Watch, they're probably watching every single thing you say.
Yeah. It's funny. A lot of the stuff that we work on, the type of research that I do, I think on a daily basis, I'm probably being added to watch lists, kind of on the regular.
I know. I'm sort of thinking of naming I've definitely got, from just even conversations like these, I've definitely got a guy who's just like assigned to watch me 24/7 through my Mac camera. So whenever I'm working, I'll just like wave hi to Jerry because I know he's just watching, and it's nice to have a conversation with that guy.
It's nice to have some company.
Yeah. So, okay, talk about this under 16s ban a little bit more, because you've been working on this for quite a long time, and now it's here. And could you explain a little bit more about, is it the sort of Christmas list that they did to get this in, because they just slipped it in?
Yeah. So basically what happened was there's a bill called the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill. This has been ongoing for quite a long time. It had sort of various standard children's issues in it, things like school uniforms and children in care, that kind of thing. And then a bill goes through various stages. And the idea is that you're supposed to discuss stuff quite early on so that everybody gets the chance to have their say. Organizations like Big Brother Watch or other kind of groups like this have the opportunity to talk about it. Except what happened with the social media ban is it was slipped in right at the very last stage of this bill, which meant that groups like us, I mean, we're a very, very small team. We only have 7 full-time staff members. So we're really kind of rushed off our feet when it comes to...
Each one of you does quite a lot, it seems.
Each one of us is kind of... We will have, I don't know, 3 or 4 big policy areas, and then there's a whole other sort of list of things around that we do. So, and we're not the only group who pack a big punch but have a very small team. So it meant that when this ban idea was introduced right at the very last stage... there was very little chance for people like us to have any kind of opposition, and that was definitely done on purpose. So it was the idea of a ban was introduced by a Tory peer called Lord Nash, and his big idea was basically just ban children from social media, blanket ban. If you're under 16, you cannot access any type of social media. And what of course was just incredibly sort of frustrating, but also kind of hilarious, was that there is no definition of what social media is. So his ban had this idea of user-to-user services, which includes everything from TikTok, but also Wikipedia. So how are you going to decide what social media people are banned from? The idea was that they'll make a list of services, but it just didn't make any sense. It was just very clear sort of policy making from a place of, we have to do something.
Some older gentleman who doesn't understand social media enacting policies that just make life worse for everyone.
Absolutely. I mean, what was really frustrating in those early stages of the kind of ban discussion was just watching some of these debates in the House of Lords, because this came in the House of Lords. Some of these debates where peers over the age of 70 were talking about social media, and they clearly had no idea what, even conceptually, what social media is or how it's used.
Well, they just get like a basic idea, because there was the whole... I think it's still an ongoing lawsuit. I don't know if it's fully settled yet, but there's the whole thing in America with Facebook, where they found out that loads of young women were harming themselves, basically, or killed themselves because of basically comparison online. So they see this and they hear this from people, and they go, "Oh my God, all we need to do is ban it, and that's going to solve all of our problems."
Yeah. One interesting note about that trial actually is that's a jury trial, which means that in this, I mean, obviously this is a very sensitive topic, right? And it's not. It often sounds very harsh when we say that there is no direct correlation between social media use and harm to mental or physical health. That correlation scientifically just does not exist.
Okay.
It is true, obviously, that there is a lot of anecdotal evidence for this. It could also be, of course, some scientists have pointed to the idea that people who already have mental health issues tend to gravitate more to social media because they might be isolated from their real world peers, or they have struggles in the real world. So it's a very complicated situation that basically hasn't been studied thoroughly enough. But I think what I find so concerning is that a lot of these particularly older people hear a few stories and then they say, okay, well, clearly there's a correlation. Clearly banning this thing is just going to be the solution. And what's very concerning is that there's obviously a large group of people, also young people, who would be worse off if they could not interact with people online.
This is the big problem, is like you have an older generation, our parents' generation, that always talk about the fact that life was better back in the day and you didn't have to lock your doors and you could go out and play, and now kids are on their phones all the time. But the problem is phones are there. You can't take them away from kids. If anything, if you're taking a phone away, I mean, I think there's something to be said for not giving a baby a phone. There's the thing of like, you go to a restaurant and all the babies are playing on iPads and that's horrible, and they're playing games and watching videos that are just meant to get them addicted. I keep bringing this up. There's a show, and the whole point of the show is to get kids addicted to...
Oh, is that Cocomelon?
Cocomelon. Yeah. There's one where like it just constantly switches and the colors are changing. And it's like a weird... When you watch it as an adult, you're like, this is some
really odd.
Weird, disorienting... It's like a weird dream state thing.
Yeah.
But it's just meant to capture attention and bright colors and like flowers and bumblebees and things. So they're clearly trying to do this from early on. But I think when you're a kid and you're going to school and your parents need to know where you are afterwards, and you can just send them a text or give them a call. I think that's a thing that we need to have now for safety reasons. But I don't know. I mean, you've been working on this for a long time. I always say the best thing is education.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like we have the education.
Agree.
It seems like outright banning versus education seems to be the thing, but they never go for the education route because that's too difficult and that's too hard, and they don't know possibly how to enact that sort of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's before sort of talking about education, because that is a topic I want to come back to. I think it's also worth just kind of stating that the only way we can talk about banning children from social media all we want, right? The only way to do this is for platforms to ascertain whether a person is a child. And the only way to do that is to either undergo a biometric face scan that would use age estimation technology to try to figure out how old you are.
That's right, yeah. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because I read your article that you put out. What was the news?
It was the Spectator.
The Spectator. It was what came out 2 or 3 days ago.
Yesterday, actually.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a great article. People should check it out. And I did read that, and I was curious. Are they not going to? Maybe it's part of the thing that we don't know. Is it not the thing where you're going to have to upload some sort of an ID and then scan your face? It's like, where do they do that? I mean, even when you're going to a bar or something, like they'll look at your face, or like when you're buying, I buy like CBD drinks from Waitrose, and so you've got to pull out your ID sometimes, which is shocking still for my age, but sometimes I start to pull out ID. And is it not the thing where you'd have to upload an ID so that they can see your face and then match the face to, or is it just the thing where they're going to scan your face?
Well, so it kind of depends. I mean, so much with this ban is up in the air. I was saying earlier that it's just I'm in all these group chats with a lot of other people who work on this, and we're all trying to figure out. And this morning on the train over here, I was trying to figure out what the hell is going on exactly. Everyone's trying to figure out what's been voted on and how it's going to work. But fundamentally, there's a couple of ways. It was what they call highly effective age assurance,
right?
And I think, well, you can stick the word highly effective on the back of anything. It doesn't make it highly effective.
I mean, even me as an actor, what I'll do is to age myself down for a role, I'll shave my face and I look 14. So if I shaved my face, I might not be able to get into my Instagram.
Well, this is the thing, right? So there's a couple of ways of doing this. There's the most sort of popular one at the moment is a biometric face scan. So you're currently under the Online Safety Act, if you want to access anything that is like adult content or what is considered harmful content, that includes, by the way, a lot of content about the war in Gaza or the war in Ukraine, which is very concerning that's being kept from younger people. Yeah. But one of the ways to prove your age is to sort of scan your face. The issue with that technology is that if you're a white man and you're like, I don't know, you're like 45 or something, you'll probably get through and you probably won't have to upload an ID because the technology is able to identify you and identify your age. For those of us who do not fall into that category, or for whatever reason are not able to get through the biometric face scan, the backup option basically is to upload an ID. So this then brings up the problem that there are a lot of people in Britain who don't have, for instance, like passports or driver's licenses, particularly younger people. So if there's an under 16 social media ban, it means that people 16 to 18, they're still children. They don't have, a lot of the time they don't have IDs.
Is it I remember seeing this before. So in the invention of cameras and sort of filmmaking, they were obviously made more for white faces because it was white faces that were on screen the majority of the time. And that's a
Yeah.
problem that has sort of gone away, but still kind of developed with cameras. They sort of like expose, I mean, it's part of the thing we were doing at the start was exposure and making sure that we were both lit properly.
Yeah.
That cameras, especially when you've got a multi-purpose iPhone or something like that, is not as good at recognizing black faces as it is white faces, for example.
Right. That's exactly
so then
right.
you're going to have a big problem with younger black children
Yeah.
who might, or even adults who might be 18, but it's going to not recognize their face. And this is a big problem that I know Silky Carlo talks about with the policing that
Yeah.
goes on in London, and people get recognized as different faces because just naturally black or darker faces tend to get misread as a different face.
Yeah. So there's the camera issue. Then there's also the actual algorithms that these technologies are trained on. So
And I imagine that's like a black box thing. Nobody is allowed to know what that is.
As far as I know, a lot of companies keep that quite secret, and it's hard to figure out exactly what the training data is, especially when you're dealing with such a large data set. But what's also very concerning is that so Black people often tend to get misidentified. The darker skin tone is, the harder it is for the camera to even recognize that there is a person there, particularly if you're not like sort of super brightly lit. But if you look at like East Asian faces, these types of faces often get estimated as being younger than they are. I actually know somebody who is of Chinese descent. She's a 27-year-old woman, fully grown woman, and she frequently gets locked out of services because the face scan thinks that she's a child,
Right.
And because she has a younger looking face.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was in Japan last year, and all you see is posters everywhere because Japan is so obsessed with like youth.
Yeah.
Or in a way, I think we kind of are getting that way here, but I think there's still something to be said for like older people and like a respect for the older generation, where it seems like Japan, all the respect is on the youth. And like you see band members who are in their 30s, but they just like, they're so just clean.
Well, it's more of a beauty standard thing, I think, in Japan. It's I know that in Japan there is a lot of kind of institutional respect for older ages, but there is a bit more of a sense of like if you're younger, you're fresher, you're kind of there's an optimism there. And this particular they've got an aging population, so actually I think I've never been to Japan, but I imagine that walking around some areas it's just going to be old people everywhere.
Definitely the case. Yeah. Apparently there's a thing that you've got certain like, and we don't really use this in English. It seems like it's a thing in kind of European languages, but there's the sort of like when you're talking to an elder or a teacher, you address them with the proper way of doing it. In Japan, that's really a thing.
Oh yes,
and
absolutely.
Apparently what they'll do is they'll go out and they'll have, it's sort of from what I've heard, I don't know what the word for this is, but they'll traditionally go out, like if you've got an office, you go out and you drink maybe like once a month or once a week with that office right at the weekend. And what you do, the whole point of drinking is to get drunk with everyone because it's like a way of socializing. It's almost part of like your requirement for working in this place.
Yeah.
And naturally what people will do when they get drunk with older or younger people is they drop those standards for just that one night. Everyone is sort of on the same level, and then the next day they'll sort of come back to, but generally there is very much a respectful thing in the way you address people in Japan. I'd say even more than like French or Italian or European
definitely.
languages.
I mean, it's part of the kind of Confucian worldview, and I know that also in Japan, like when you're out drinking with your colleagues, the youngest one has to pour the drinks for the older one. So if you're older, you never pour a drink for a younger person. So there's a lot of, I know Korea is even more extreme when it comes to these kinds of hierarchies according to age.
Great.
And it's really interesting.
So I want to bring it back because I had a question about, so when you are going and speaking to MPs about something like this social media ban, do you know who else is speaking to them? Because obviously other people you're essentially acting as like a low power lobby to go in and get your sort of choices made. It feels like you might be up against some really big people with a lot of power who want the opposite thing as you.
That's right. Yeah, we're actually still trying to figure out who is behind the lobbying for this.
Still don't know
this social media ban. We're unsure. We have sort of some ideas, but it's still quite unclear.
Do you have any idea who it? Because it's not social media companies, obviously.
No. Yeah. Social media companies are very much against the ban. So it's very weird being on this sort of on the side of big tech at the moment.
Sort of like James Bondy. You've got this shadowy figure that you don't quite know who your enemy is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of I sort of, this is just kind of speaking personally, I doubt it's sort of some kind of giant, large organization. I think there's a lot of smaller organizations that are that coordinate very well.
Right. So what, like parents that are concerned
Yeah,
and maybe
like
don't know what they're talking about?
lots
Or...
of there's lots of parents groups that are very, very vocal, and they get funding from God knows where to kind of carry out their activities. What has been interesting, actually, since we're talking about parents, is that the current narrative a lot of the time is that all parents are in favor of a social media ban and that all parents want this. But there's actually a sort of a really interesting alliance of 42 children's charities and parents who very sadly lost their children as a result of social media harms, who are campaigning against a ban. So they recognize that social media also has positive sides, and that it's not as easy as saying, okay, just like blanket ban this entire type of technology. And so we've been in contact with some of these groups. Internet Matters is one of them. The head of the informal head of the alliance is a group called the Molly Rose Foundation.
Okay. Is this the Molly versus the Machines film?
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So her dad, the daughter who sadly passed away, her dad is the kind of head of this organization, and their campaigning has basically been around the importance of education around social media, and also the enforcement of the Online Safety Act. Now that's something where we differ. So at Big Brother Watch, we're also against that Online Safety Act, but we do really appreciate that that alliance of organizations are bringing some nuance into the space. Because again, like a lot of the conversations are, should children be on social media all the time? And I think like everybody agrees no. Like no, they shouldn't. Should a 14-year-old be scrolling on TikTok at 3 a.m. on a school night? Absolutely not. But does that mean that we should blanket ban a technology and enforce that blanket ban with age verification and digital IDs? No, of course not. But it's just not that simple. It's not like buying dangerous items in real life where you go to the cashier, you show your ID, no data is retained. The cashier checks with their IRL eyes what your age is, and you get your knife or you get your alcohol or whatever, and you're on your way. Online, it just doesn't work like that, because you have to submit something, and anytime you submit any kind of sensitive information like a face scan or like your ID, there is a risk that information gets stored, leaked, and then we're all in really big trouble.
Well, I mean, if it's stored anywhere, there's always a risk that it's going to get leaked. That's always a problem. Yeah. I mean, I think even from the example of like, it's such a difficult thing, because we were talking a little bit before the podcast as well about the smoking ban that's come into place. And it's that really difficult thing where, yes, smoking is putting a strain on NHS services, but at the end of the day, it's about education. And if people, and like, you know, for the longest time, Americans talk about coming over to the UK, buying cigarettes, and they go back to America and they roll a cigarette in a bar and someone screams because they've never seen the like symbols that we have, the horrifying symbols on smoking like tobacco bags. And for the longest time that's been in place. And I think you just need to educate people. And even something as simple as, so I learned recently, I've been learning a lot about sleep because my sleep has been horrible recently. And I was learning about the effects of how bad light is on your sleep. So we've all heard the thing of like, you kind of want to shut off lights and stop watching TV and stop looking at your phone roughly an hour before bed. I didn't realize it's as bad as, say you're in a hotel or you need to go to the bathroom at night. Even 15 seconds of turning on a bathroom light will immediately disrupt your sleep levels. So there's a big problem with children who have night lights in their bedroom, right? If you've got a night light in your bedroom, the cortisol in your body that wakes you up in the morning is directly linked to your glucose and your like sugar spikes in your body and your blood. So children who have a nightlight in their bedroom have like kind of a dangerously high glucose spike in the morning because their glucose has been spiking kind of all night. So by the time they wake up and they get this big spike to wake them up in the morning, they're underslept and they've got this big sugar spike, and then they have more health problems, especially if you're sleeping with a nightlight night after night and night after night. So you've got this problem where if kids are on their phones, not only are they seeing things on social media and maybe doing things that they shouldn't be doing at 3 o'clock in the morning, which I definitely did when I was a kid. I had a Mac in my room, I had my iPhone, but you're also disrupting your sleep and then making yourself sort of less able to function during the day. Yeah, it's a horrifying thing.
I mean, it's definitely really concerning, and basically what we think is really important is that parents actually take more responsibility for taking phones away from their children, or not giving their children phones at these ridiculously young ages. Of course, it's one thing to take away a phone from a 15-year-old when they've been hooked on sort of devices since the age of 2. Of course, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. But if you don't give them a phone or a device from a younger age, then it's going to be easier to kind of to help your child sort of develop these like healthy habits with a device.
Yeah.
And so it's not the case that being against a social media ban means that we want children to be like on their phones and doing all these things and ruining their sleep and ruining their mental health and all of that by consuming content for 12 hours a day. But it's just there are other solutions, and like a blanket ban that is going to ruin everybody's privacy and freedom of speech is just like not. It just doesn't make sense. It's just not one or the other.
Yeah. Is there any idea? Are there any studies being done? Is this anything that maybe you guys are doing to know? Because I've never heard it discussed actually. Like, when is a good age for children to get phones?
Well, that's interesting. So, like, it's not something that we do. We don't work actively with children. We don't do research like that. But
I wonder if maybe any of these charities are doing it.
Yeah, there are. I feel like. I think there's some university studies that are looking at this. And then this is just not my area, so I can't sort of cite things off the top of my head.
It's just fascinating with everything we're talking about, with just outright banning things and not talking about education, that a study like that hasn't even been done.
Yeah,
it goes to show, it's like when you talk about women's health and they're like, oh, we still don't know this thing. It's like because women's health wasn't really studied and still isn't really studied to the sort of point that it should be. So it feels like that's something that needs to be done, because from what I understand about the development of children, you've got like 3 stages of learning. So like you first learn when you're young. I can't remember what ages this is. It's maybe like 2, 5, and 7. You get the sort of ability to understand physical objects in your space. So you understand like babies playing with different shapes and putting the square in that one and the circle in that one. And then you begin to understand things like abstract thought. I think there's a middle stage in there as well. It's like something else beyond physical, and then there's abstract thought, and you don't really understand that until you're like 7 or 9. But we're literally giving children iPads and phones by the time they're 2, and so you're sort of growing up. You don't even understand how to like think properly yet, and now you've got this phone or this thing, and it's a horrifying situation.
Yeah, it's really bad. There's actually a really concerning statistic from Internet Matters. They're one of the organizations that I mentioned earlier, who are campaigning against a ban, but they are a children's charity.
And that's the one run by Molly's dad?
No, that's a different one. Yeah, so that's the Molly Rose Foundation. And then the Internet Matters is just a separate organization, and they look at sort of children's sort of online health and safety. But there's a really concerning statistic from them that basically says that about a third of parents use parental controls on their children's devices. Which is, I find that really astonishing.
I think a lot of people don't even know that you can do it.
Yeah, and this is why we need education, right? Because I think that there's a lot of parents out there who are just yearning for some kind of help with this technology that they might not have grown up with, and even if they are younger, sort of Gen Z parents, sort of Gen Z technology or technology that Gen Zs were exposed to in their childhood is just vastly different from what their children are experiencing. So there's just this huge cohort of parents that desperately want help and they want guidance, but instead of sort of proper, sort of deep and useful help, they're kind of being handed this idea of a ban, and because that's sort of the only option that's being put on the table, it's understandable that a lot of parents think, okay, I guess that is something that I'm in favor of.
And they don't know what to do because there's no education for them either.
Exactly.
So they just go, okay, well, I'll do this, or I'll just let them have the phone or whatever it is. Yeah.
What's concerning when it comes to the education as well is that, as far as I understand it, this might have changed by the time that this podcast
it most likely will.
Yeah, everything's constantly changing.
It's going to come out tomorrow, by the way, but it'll probably have changed by then.
Yeah, no, I think it wouldn't surprise me if they've changed stuff in a couple hours already. But they last night they voted for the social media ban, and as part of that vote, they voted in favor of providing some education for children in schools. Now, this sounds like it's good on the surface. This is very much the type of thing that we have advocated for.
Sure.
The concerning thing is just that the way that this is phrased at the moment is less about digital literacy, and it's more about, I think it's put in terms of explaining to children why a social media ban is in place. So it's not about, okay, well, here's how you interact with the online space.
We've done it. Here you go.
It's more like, we've done it. Here you go. This is why this is why it's important. It's sort
this
of
is why we're right.
Yeah, this is why we're right. Exactly. And so that's just wasting such a valuable opportunity, because I think children there's so many studies where children express that they don't know that they don't know how to engage with the online world, that they want to learn. Parents want their children to learn. Parents want to learn themselves. Teachers want to learn how to interact with parents and children. So there's this yearning for knowledge, and instead the government has said, okay, no, actually we're just going to kind of shove this propaganda down your throat instead, explaining why this ban is a good idea.
Yeah.
And giving you no further skills. Again, this might have changed. I very much hope that they have fleshed it out, or that they will flesh it out by the time it actually comes into force. But to be cynical, I honestly really doubt the quality of the lessons that they'll put in place.
Yeah, it's sort of thinking about it a little bit more, and people who might be lobbying the government to enact this sort of a thing. If I want to put on my tinfoil hat, which I often do, I tend to live in my tinfoil hat, you might say something like, who would want this in place? It might be the companies that the government turns to enact this sort of a policy.
Yeah.
To upload your digital ID to, because they're going to make loads of money. Who might be a good candidate for that? Something like Palantir, which has recently now come into the NHS, and I know a lot of people have problems with this, and this is a big thing.
It's really
and
incredible.
If they're already using something like Palantir for taking people's data and storing it for health services, why wouldn't they just use the same company that they've already paid, what was it, a £200 million deal to Palantir to basically run the NHS for them?
Yeah.
So
it's really concerning. My so the director of Big Brother Watch, Silke Carlo, actually put it in terms of I think she said that it's the digital ID is a solution in search of a problem, and I think that's exactly right. It's this giant sort of shiny, glittery, sort of futuristic thing that's being presented as this solution to everything. But yeah, then if you sort of have no way to apply it, you have to kind of invent ways to apply it. So that's what I was saying about a lot of people not having IDs. To pass through age gates, if that's the case, the government's going to say, well, like, okay, well, we've put in place all these age gates. You need some kind of ID to get through it. For those of you who don't have an ID, lucky you, it's your lucky day. We have digital IDs waiting in the wings, ready and ready to be deployed immediately.
Yeah, and then now you've got all this stuff as well of people getting arrested, and it's constantly mentioned in American podcasts that the UK is arresting more people for tweets than Russia.
Yeah.
Which is a big problem. And now if you say anything that might be out of line with the government or anything that they dislike, they could arrest you. And now they've got your ID on your social media, which is just a horrible situation. I don't know if you've looked into that at all, about free speech policing.
Absolutely, yeah. So part of our free speech campaign right now is looking at people being arrested for speech. And you're absolutely right to say that the numbers in the UK are just baffling. There are so many laws in Britain that allow people to be arrested for speech. Only recently, there is something that was abolished that was called a non-crime hate incident.
Right.
That allowed the police to basically they wouldn't arrest you because it wasn't a crime. But the police were still involved, and a non-crime hate incident could be put on your police record.
I saw that. And I this is insane. They've been doing this for a couple of months now, where the police will take female police officers, they will put them in tight gym clothes, they'll have them go out and go jogging, and anyone who might wolf whistle or catcall them, they'll pull them over, or they'll stop them, and they'll sort of give them a stern talking to. And that something like that might be put on a record, even though it's not technically a crime. And it's not a good thing. I'm not recommending that people go catcalling people, because it's a horrible thing to do. But it feels like a strong waste of police resources to go and tell people off, and then put someone on a record for basically not being an educated person and catcalling a woman running past.
Yeah, actually, I didn't know about that. That's really concerning.
I think it was The Guardian did a piece on it, so I was like, okay, this is, because I sort of heard that, and I was like, this can't possibly be true, but it turns out it is the case.
So much of the stuff that we work on at Big Brother Watch is exactly like that. That you hear something, you think that there's no way that's true. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And
what other examples are there of what was the word you used for it? Non-crime
hate incidents.
Non-crime hate incident. Okay, right. So
some examples examples off the top of my head. I can't remember which police districts these take place, but there's one example where a schoolgirl was having an argument with her friend, and I think said that she smelled like fish or something like
Right,
that.
right.
I mean, yeah, teenage girls. I've been one. I've experienced it.
Yeah, we've all been a teenager.
They can be rude, but the police got involved, and that girl now has something on her record that says that she's that she said that to a friend.
Right.
There's another example where some children were playing with chalk outside of a woman's house. They were just drawing random stuff as children do. Nothing hateful, literally just like, I don't know, houses or whatever.
Sure.
And a woman complained, and the children were given a sort of non-crime hate incident notice on their records.
That's so weird.
The woman said that it was because she thought it was like racial in nature.
Right.
But the chalk actually went all the way down the street. So it's not like it's not the case where they targeted her house or anything. They were just drawing with chalk on the pavement, not on her own private property or anything like that.
Not even spray painting anything. Just chalk,
no,
which
it
is
literally just
wash
chalk.
away in the rain.
Two bouts of rain and it's gone. So there's incidents like that, and it's actually this idea of the non-crime hate incident came from a really good place, as a lot of these things do, right? They have there's good intentions behind them. Back in 1991, there was a black boy who was just sort of brutally murdered on the street by a group of white teenage boys, and the community had basically been trying to alert the police, like, look, there's some racial stuff going on in this neighborhood, but because none of the things that happened were crimes, the police kind of ignored it. So as a result of that,
even though it was a murder.
So this was before the murder.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, so basically, there were no crimes in the lead up to the murder. Then the murder happened. And but because there was no record of these incidents happening, racial incidents happening before the murder.
It sort of stopped the intervention that could have happened before that.
Yeah,
okay.
So Stephen Lawrence was the victim's name. His mother campaigned to get this idea of sort of non-crime hate incidents put in place. So it's very noble intentions there. It's just that the way that the police have been going about actually policing non-crimes has just kind of devolved into ridiculousness. So it's very
horrible.
good that these, as of this year, a couple months ago, they were declared not fit for purpose, and they will be disappearing from the from the kind of law very shortly. I think in a couple months or so.
And is there anything to sort of try to reenact what they were trying to do, or is it just, oh, that didn't work, get rid of it?
Not at the moment. At the moment, it does seem like it's kind of like it's gone for good. That we can, as always, we can see what happens. But there's a kind of a recognition also amongst police forces that this is not, this was not fit for purpose. Which is, it's good to sort of have a bit of a victory in a climate where there's a lot of policing of speech. Of course, concerning is that non-crime hate incidents were not arrestable offences because they weren't technically offences, but all the other arrestable speech offences still remain in place.
I sort of think, I would wonder, and I don't know if you know, if, for example, the children who got arrested for drawing chalk, if this goes away, is their record going to be cleared? I reckon probably not.
No, I think. I think it might be the case that the records are cleared. That was definitely one of the calls that was made in Parliament. But the bill's still kind of, it's going through the last phases right now. So we'll have to wait for a couple of weeks to see exactly what happens. Right.
Okay. All right. I want to take it over to you for a little bit, because I know we talked about this on the radio, but I do want to hear about your journey to get into this, because you've been doing this for a while, and Big Brother Watch is I'm just so impressed with everything your organization is doing. But can you tell people a little bit about your background and how you got into free speech? Yeah,
so I think, like I said to you on the radio a couple of weeks ago, I never considered myself a sort of very overtly political person or anything like that. I'm a very curious person by nature. I love discussing ideas just because they exist. And I've also never really had a sense that some ideas are kind of beyond discussion and some ideas aren't. So I'm Dutch, I'm from the Netherlands, and I studied at Oxford. So that's when I moved over to the UK. So I came into the UK with this idea of Britain as a kind of this BBC One, BBC Two image.
Haven,
Sherlock and Doctor Who and all of that kind of stuff. And I had this image of Oxford as well, and I kind of thought it was going to be this like oasis of like people dressed in like blazers, learning and kind of like lying on boats and at their leisure reading books. And I got there, and I was really, to my surprise, this was in 2017. I was really to my surprise that I found that a lot of people were very hesitant about speaking openly. And it wasn't because they were scared. It wasn't because anyone else was censoring them. It was because they were censoring themselves. I think a lot of...
Was it about any particular topics, or was it just generally?
Well, it was generally. I think a lot of the time in the media, when you hear about self-censorship at universities, you hear it about certain topics, people with gender-critical views, sort of controversial issues like that. But there are a lot of people who I found were very sort of hesitant about discussing just like healthcare policy and things like that. And this is where I was really like, okay, well, what's going on? We all worked really hard to get here. I was still naive enough to think that everybody worked very hard to get there, and that there weren't people who were just kind of funneled through. But and so I sort of naively thought, well, we all know that we're in here with the best intentions. Why can't we speak openly? And as a result of that sort of impulse, I talked to a few other people who felt the same. I founded the Oxford Society for Free Discourse. You'll notice that the name is a sort of a mouthful. That's because we were ironically too scared to use the term free speech because at this point, late 2010s,
it almost has a right wing
exactly
ring to it, which is very upsetting.
It's really concerning. I mean, this was right at the height of the culture wars and those compilations where sort of like right wing guy destroys blue haired liberal. That was huge on the internet.
And so you would have still been studying at the start of COVID, is that right as well?
Yeah, that's
and that
right.
must have been a very interesting time to be a part of the free speech discourse.
That was interesting. So we set up this society, and the goal was we want to reclaim this notion of free speech. I think in hindsight, I would have sort of tried to sort of have a bit more balls and say, you know what, like we're going to reclaim the actual term free speech. It was still too sort of scared at the time, but we just hosted like a bunch of events. We had slightly more controversial events with speakers like Douglas Murray. We also had my favorite event was with an author whose pen name is Shinran, spelled with an X at the beginning, and she was a radio host of a women's I got to say this right, women's radio women's hour.
Okay.
Program back in China in the 1980s, where so her life under Mao was obviously like incredibly eventful, and she's seen so much about how Chinese politics has changed over the decades.
I'm surprised there could even be a women's hour in the 1980s in China.
Well, this is what was so interesting about her as a person. I also really recommend everybody to go out and to read her books, because they're really fascinating. She sort of had these radio interviews with women about just kind of sexuality, relationships, and this was all kind of, these were women who had been taught their entire lives that you are not allowed to speak about anything ever, either because of political reasons or because you're a woman. So it was this
cultural,
kind of this double whammy of censorship. So her work really explores freedom of speech as something that is not just political, but it's personal. It's got to do with our relationships and the way we see ourselves in the world. So those are...
Did that radio station go away under the new...
Yeah, so
Chinese
I think
Communist Party?
So she moved back to so she was born and raised in China. I think she was born in the early 60s off the top of my head, and then I think it was in the 90s that she moved to the UK, and then the radio show kind of fizzled out when she left as well. But she did definitely interview people for certainly a couple of years, if not like a decade. And in her work, she explores some of the interviews that she did, but also she's been writing about sort of Chinese life and sort of the experience of women in China for a long time now.
Right. So how then does the free speech discourse
Society for Free Discourse
Society for
we can call it the Free Speech Society.
Yes, leave the word speech out and you'll be fine. How does that differ from something like a debate society at Oxford? Because famously Oxford and Cambridge both have very good debate societies, and they invite speakers on all the time, and sort of you got loads of people asking controversial questions, especially if it's someone like Douglas Murray. It tends to be people asking quite controversial questions because they don't agree with their point of view. So how were you doing something different then?
Yeah, so what we never had is we never had a speaker event. So we every event we had was somehow discourse. So that would be either
So they'd like Douglas Murray would like bring a topic.
well, no, so either we would interview the speaker. So all of our speakers were interviewed by a member of the committee. So that way there was this kind of, we had us as the kind of neutral person. Obviously we all come with our own biases, but we tried to keep it neutral.
Sure.
And then the speaker was constantly challenged, not just from the audience, but also by us continuously. So we never gave people just a straight up platform. And I think that's what really set us apart.
Sure.
We also made sure that I think it was the division of time that we had was like 1/3 of it was an interview with the speaker, and then 2/3 of it was Q&A with the audience. So at no point did the speaker just get the chance to just kind of speak. I think a lot of the time when people talk about like no platforming people or like the importance of a platform, I think a misconception is that giving somebody any kind of platform automatically means just letting them talk without any kind
or
of
that
opposition.
you agree with every single thing that
Or
they
that you
say,
agree with everything.
just by having them on.
Yes, exactly. And what we really tried to do was counter that idea and say, okay, well, like, yes, they're on this platform and we're giving them this space to speak, but we're also raising the audience members and the committee members up onto the platform. So we're all sitting on the platform right now. It's nice and crowded, and we're all chatting with each other, and it's a bit messier. So that's something that I'm really proud of. And what was really interesting was that the committee was just, I think it was overwhelmingly, it was like liberal lefties. The majority of us were somehow, we had one straight white man on the committee. Everybody else was like, somehow had like a diversity card.
Sure.
So we were kind of, we were almost like the antithesis of what you would expect the Oxford Free Speech Society to look like. But despite that, everybody or not everybody, but a lot of people in the liberal lefty circles saw what we were doing, and they said, okay, well, they just immediately assumed, okay, you're the enemy. And then a lot of people on the right saw what we were doing, and they were like, oh my God, you want to come join our other societies and our other events and like come to London and do these events with us. And so it was a very lonely place to be.
So as a comedian, Daniel Sloss, I highly recommend everyone watch his work. He's brilliant, Scottish comedian. And he's got this really good bit. He occasionally goes to America and does these big jokes about left versus right just because it works really well there. And he says, he's like, I'm definitely on the left. I'm not on the right. But the problem with the left is you have to get on board with every single thing they say.
Right.
So it's like, are you vegan? Yeah, I'm vegan. It's like, are you, do you like trans people? It's like, yeah, I like trans people. And then you mention like one other thing. It's like, do you agree with this really hard left-wing point? And it's like, well, I don't know about that. And they're like, well, then go join the fucking Nazis then, which seems to be the case. And like, you don't really want to just jump into the right. It's this weird center, but the center always seems to be classed as the right from the left.
Yeah, well, it's quite difficult. I think that's changed over the years. I'm glad to say we're almost sort of 10 years on from that point. And I think increasingly there has been more of a center that's developed. The problem with the center is that they're often sort of apathetic. They're not passionately the center.
Right.
So the loudest voices are those on the left and the right. And if you are going to be somebody who's going to work in a political space and you express anything, it's hard to sort of appeal to the center because they're not going to give you a lot of feedback back.
Yeah.
And that's actually so one of the reasons I joined Big Brother Watch years and years after all this uni free speech campaigning was that they're sort of it's such a it's a fiercely politically independent organization. We campaign for principles, not parties. We campaign for fundamental civil liberties. And that means that it can be difficult sometimes as well. So something I work on is protest rights, for instance.
Yeah.
And we're...
Something that Labour never talked about, even when they were campaigning, which I was shocked about, that it wasn't their first point of action. There was no policy. And it's what I said from the start, because people were really excited about Labour and the Tories getting out. And don't get me wrong, I was excited about the Tories getting out because it was horrible. People occasionally remind me that Liz Truss even existed. And I'm like, oh yeah. And now she's really popular in America, which I can't stand. I don't know if you've seen this. She's basically like, no one will listen to a single thing she says here anymore.
Right.
So now she's gone over to America because
Fresh
now
audience.
she's former prime minister speaks. And so she sounds like she's intelligent, but it's like, it's just horrible. So a lot of people were really excited about Labour getting in. I knew it was a sham from the start because they weren't talking about most of the important things. I read it was recommended to me, and I read the biography of Keir Starmer, and I was like, okay, seems like he comes from a good place. He's done some good pro bono work for some good people in the past, and then basically got in and started accepting £10,000 pajamas and glasses from people. And I think he's still accepting those things from people, if I'm not mistaken, and has never talked about the fact that we got our free speech and protest rights eroded.
Yeah. No, I mean, it even worse is that actually under the Labour government, just recently they've been passing just absolutely diabolical sort of anti-protest laws,
Such as
so one of the ones that they're bringing in, it should go into force in a couple of months, is something against what they call cumulative disruption.
Okay.
Now, this basically means that the law is that a police officer can designate a certain area as a protest as a protest zone.
Right. Yeah.
And then if there are too many protests within that zone, the police basically get the opportunity to say, actually, you're not allowed to protest.
Too many protests or protesters?
Protests.
Right.
So
so you could theoretically, if you disagree with a protest that's going on, you could start your own protest and then get the whole thing shut down.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
No, so this is what we call first come, first serve free speech. And it's kind of, you can imagine an area as having almost like a certain number of like protest tokens. And once those tokens run out, no more protest anymore. And the goal of it, allegedly, was to prevent cumulative disruption. So,
how do you count protests? Because, like, for example, if you're having, I'm just going to give the example because it was a big one recently. It was last year was the big Ignite the Right. Ignite the Night? Oh, I can't remember. Unite the Right.
Yeah.
With Tommy Robinson. And then and people have their different opinions on Tommy Robinson. I like some things he says and I dislike other things he says. But what they are very careful about is not getting arrested. They like to follow the path and they like to be careful. And then a lot of people, when you actually speak to people who were there, they go, what do you think about Nigel Farage? Thinking that everyone there is like, oh, yes. And they're like, no, actually, we hate Nigel Farage. There's just a lot of things that we can't talk about in this country at the moment, and we're upset about that. But theoretically, whether it's Tommy Robinson or whether it's Extinction Rebellion, you could get, a tiny group of, theoretically, Black Lives Matter protesters, or you name the group. You could get 3 people turn up with placards, and that counts as one more protest. And so you can just shut it down as a police officer. You're like, I want to go home early, so there's a third one, and we're going to shut this whole thing down.
Basically, yeah. I mean, it's a really sort of stupid law that completely ignores the fact that the reason why protests work is because they cause cumulative disruption.
Yeah.
They, over time, make their voices more and more known to the people that around the area in which they're protesting. They get their voice out in the media, and that is how change happens. But to say, okay, you know what, actually this protest is loud and annoying, so it's not allowed anymore, is just wild. It just completely ignores.
And if anyone's ever been to a protest around Westminster or watched a video of it, whenever there's any protest, all the crazy protesters, I'm going to give the example of, like, there's the people who are like, milk prices are too high, because those people are always there. They always go, oh my God, there's a protest happening. Let's get our placards out and let's stand there and tell people that milk prices are 35p too high.
Yeah.
So you're just going to get the people who you can't control coming in there to talk about things that are really not that important anyway, but are nonetheless there. And it's just going to... We're never going to have protests ever again, basically.
No, well, I mean, it's the way that sort of protests over the last, let's say, decade or so have kind of been reframed from being a fundamental universal right that is an essential part of our democracy to an inconvenient privilege that is bestowed very kindly by the government upon a certain lucky few.
Right.
And that's such a sort of dystopian shift. And what we're also just very concerned about, obviously, is this whole situation with Palestine Action, and whether you agree with the cause that they stand for or not, it is very concerning that the government basically have come out and prescribed this group as a terrorist organization. And it just shows how low the threshold for terrorism really is. There have been, I think, off the top of my head, close to 3,000 arrests. There might have been more at this point.
What was their argument for the fact it was a terrorist organization, other than obviously saying, oh, this is just a Hamas-sponsored organization?
Yeah.
Is that essentially what it was?
No, so actually the argument was even stupider.
Right.
It was that, so you can basically be... terrorism, we would think of it as like causing like violence, right? And like violence to people. But British law actually also has a provision that says that terrorism is it can also be property damage. So there were a few people who, under the label of Palestine Action, caused millions of pounds of property damage at an arms factory called Elbit Systems. I think it was
Where was this?
This was in Oxfordshire, off the top of my head.
Okay,
Yeah,
right.
and they spray painted a bunch of airplanes. They broke a bunch of drones. They caused property damage. They trespassed. All of that stuff that is illegal.
Why don't you just prosecute them for damage of property?
No,
Why does
exactly.
it need to be terrorism?
Exactly. So this is what we're very worried about.
Yeah.
Is that like there are already existing laws to prosecute these people for property damage and trespassing and breaking and entering and all of that type of stuff.
And it's what Keir Starmer famously did so well. What was it? The London riots. He famously I can't remember exactly what he did, but he changed it so the court system was easier to put people through, so he could just throw people into prison during the London riots.
Oh,
so
that's interesting. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it was during the London riots, and then he's kind of like followed it up and sort of built upon it ever since. So it seems like they are just enacting policies to make their jobs easier, so they can just sit at home and do these things instead. And you were talking about, it might have been before the podcast, you were talking about, what was it about police and like making it more difficult for police to do their job?
What?
It was something about protest laws and like sort of making it more difficult for police to do their job.
Oh, yes, right. So a lot of the justification for bringing in all of these new protest laws has been that the police are don't have enough capacity to protest, to police protests, and quite frankly, that should not be the protesters' problem.
Yeah,
it's like, I'm sorry, if the government doesn't give you enough funds or you don't organize the funds well enough, that's your problem.
It's sort of like, our side doesn't have enough people on our team, so everyone else has to go home.
So everybody else not just has to go home, everybody else is no longer allowed to exercise their civil liberties, their fundamental freedoms that every person who lives in a democracy has from the second that they're born. And for these things to be eroded away because they are inconvenient for the police or inconvenient for the people who live around areas where there are frequent protests, it's not reasonable ground.
Yeah, it's the whole argument around like digital ID as well. It's all about convenience. It's taking away, it's getting rid of safety or rights for convenience purposes. And I feel like if we've got what we've got now, then I don't see why it wouldn't just keep sliding deeper and deeper into the NHS and the smoking ban. And you're going to stop people from that. And like, what aren't you going to take away from people in the future? Like, I think you should have the right to buy crisps if you want to buy crisps. They're not good for you, but if you want to buy crisps, you can do it. There was the whole thing where, what was it? Keir Starmer took away the, you couldn't get like soft drinks in a meal deal.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
or something like that. You couldn't get unhealthy drinks in a meal deal. So they stopped that whole thing. And it's like, fine, make it. That was the whole thing around, people don't know why they enacted, it was like a £1 to buy a bag at Sainsbury's or whatever. I'm using Sainsbury's as an example, but it was everywhere. And it was actually the inconvenience. So people, they wanted people to stop buying bags because it's bad for the environment. And so actually one of the really clever ways you do that is it's not actually the £1 that stops people from doing it. It's the, do you want a bag?
It's the extra friction.
It's the extra seconds you spend at a till.
Yeah.
And they go, no, I just want to take my stuff and go.
Yeah.
And actually, it's just that clever. It was like, I don't necessarily agree with this, but it's why they put those like rounded spikes on like benches and things. Because one of the ways to stop homeless people from sleeping in places you don't want them to is just by clever engineering, essentially. There's something they enacted in France a few years ago, and it's like the distance between trees when you're driving. So in certain areas on one-way streets, they will actually space the trees slightly closer together the further down you get, because if you're driving fast, it gives you the impression that you're driving faster than you are. So you actually slow down, even though you're driving the same speed. It's like the trees are going by you more quickly, so people will just naturally slow down. Whereas here they've got that like cardboard cutout of a police officer, which no one ever buys. It freaks me out every time, and I'm like, oh, there's that cardboard cutout of the police officer. But it's like there's ways to cleverly, you can educate and you can cleverly engineer things so that you get the result you want, as opposed to just designating anyone who protests in the name of Gaza as a terrorist. It's a horrible situation.
No, exactly. And what is also just very concerning is that protest is it's a fundamental right that belongs to that is part of anybody who lives in a democracy. It's not optional, and it can't be sort of it should not be this easy to erode it away this quickly, and with such sort of weak excuses. But that is unfortunately what the government is doing. And also the some of the definitions, the reinterpretation of definitions in law is actually very interesting. So a lot of existing protest laws have things like basically if the police think that there is going to be enough that there is going to be serious disruption or serious disorder, serious disruption to the life of the community, then they have the right to impose conditions on a protest. So you think, okay, well, fine, like serious disruption, that probably means like protesters having a full-on riot. Like maybe in those cases, it's probably a good idea to kind of keep the protesters separate or something like that. But the way that these terms are being reinterpreted are like, well, serious disruption basically just means like if it causes shopkeepers to have slightly lower revenue on a protest day because people can't access the shops that easily, that counts as serious disruption. Noise levels count as serious disruption now. And so the threshold, it keeps getting lower and lower and lower to the point where basically any kind of inconvenience is classed as serious disruption, which is a term that was initially sort of reserved for like actually serious disruption.
Yeah, isn't it the thing where like I think it's the thing with online policing. If you tweet something that someone doesn't like, even if it's offensive, someone could complain in a completely different place. Someone could see it in Wales, or someone could even probably see it in America and be like, I don't like that. And then the police have the right to go in and speak to or arrest that person.
Yeah,
because
that's
it's
right.
technically offended someone.
Yeah, so it's basically if something causes harassment, alarm, or distress,
Right.
that's one of the
I mean, that's most of online content.
Kind
causes
of, yeah,
alarm,
kind
or
of.
distress.
And I think initially, again, these terms, harassment, alarm, or distress, is like this like serious stuff. But being annoyed by something or like finding something offensive or even finding something like sort of really, really unpleasant should not be sort of legal grounds to be arrested. But unfortunately that is the case. And we actually see that police forces themselves don't really have a good understanding of how to interpret these terms. We're sort of currently doing some research at the moment that shows that there is just a huge geographic discrepancy in how the police react to the same type of speech offense. So this means that if you commit a sort of speech offense in Yorkshire, and you could be, let's say and you're arrested there, you might not be arrested if you commit that speech offense in, I don't know, like London.
Yeah. Is it a big thing I feel like all the news I see is it's just things in London that are happening, police approaching people in London or coming to their houses for a tweet that they made. Is this a thing that's happening on a wider scale? Because it sort of feels like we're creating this dystopia based on what's happening in London. And then, as usual, we change policies in London and then it sort of affects everyone else. It's affecting us in a bad way, but it seems to be affecting everyone else in a worse way because they aren't even part of the problem.
Yeah. So for speech offences, it's not actually that much of a London problem. That's actually across the UK. We see huge discrepancies in how police forces arrest people for speech. For protest, it is overwhelmingly London, but that's also because most protests that are of sort of a scale that is large, or most protests of a large scale happen in London.
Sure.
Particularly around like the Houses of Parliament, things like that. So yeah, most protest laws are based on things that go on between protesters and the Met Police.
Right. So are we sliding into George Orwell? Is that what's happening? I don't see why it won't stop, because if something's inconvenient now, people will find a way to get around it. That was the whole reason people started throwing cans of soup on paintings, because it was a way to get around certain things and not technically cause violence but cause disruption. And they stopped that, and people were duct taping themselves to tube trains and things like that. I feel like people are just going to keep finding ways around it, and then people like Keir Starmer or whoever's in power. I still don't hear anyone talking about protest laws, because everyone's talking about the Greens versus Reform at the moment, and they're still not talking about protest laws.
It's really terrifying realizing that a lot of people don't seem to think about issues that are not just bipartisan, but like just transcend parties altogether. And protest laws is one of these things. Having solid protest laws in place means that people on the right can protest and people on the left can counter protest, and people on the left can protest and people on the right can counter protest. If you erode protest laws for everybody, it means no one can protest. Basically, you have the government just says, okay, you know what, everybody shut up. And that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah, and it feels like it's pushing people away from the center as well.
Yeah.
People are just going further left or further right because the one thing nobody's talking about is the fact that we should talk
Yes.
in the middle.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the terrifying things because it does feel like there is a slide to the right at the moment, certainly from the center towards people like Nigel Farage, because obviously there's this whole thing of Reform is winning seats and the Greens are winning seats, and basically nobody really cares about what the Tories or Labour are talking about anymore, which is fascinating to see a change in politics. I just wish it was over something a bit more positive.
Yeah.
I think every country could use a sort of revolution in their politics, and who seems to have been in power for the longest time, especially in this country, because it's always just kind of been those two. But it does feel like a lot of people are sliding into what Nigel Farage is saying, even though they don't agree with him, just because, again, one of the things we were talking about earlier is this idea that at the very least what you can say for the right, whether you agree with them or not, is they are giving answers, and you might not agree with those answers, and this seems not just in the UK, in Italy, in France, they are giving solutions to problems like immigration, which is a big problem, which Labour is starting to talk about. They basically didn't admit that it was a problem for a long time. Illegal immigration, I'll clarify, is a big problem in Europe, and the right were the only people who were talking about that, and so people go, oh, okay, they're actually talking about the issue, whereas, say, the Greens aren't really talking about it. They're kind of talking about it. Labour's not talking about it, and they're in power. So you get this slide to the right and people agreeing with party positions that they don't necessarily agree with, just because.
It's actually interesting talking about sort of right and left. This is something I don't work on this at Big Brother Watch, but for my master's thesis, I studied political economy, and one of the things that I wrote about in my thesis was this sense of basically it's no longer about right or left. It's about whether you're on the side of the winners of globalization or the losers of globalization.
Right, meaning.
So if you think about globalization, you think of this kind of this 90s model of everybody speaks multiple languages, open borders, we're all interacting with each other. The internet was invented around this time, and this openness, moving away from traditional values, moving away from gender roles.
And then the right hates that famously. They hate the idea of globalization because you get the one world order argument, which is, I think there's a lot to be said for that argument. Like the EU seems to be sliding into some horrible dystopia, which is almost worse than ours at the moment. And I don't like that. But you get both sides of the divide. It's like, which side of globalization are you on?
Exactly. And it's funny, actually, because again, when we say the right or the left, there's actually a lot of people on the traditional right that are in favor of globalization, because this means neoliberal economics.
Right.
This means that banks and things are also very open. So you have the economic right who actually side with the cultural left on globalization. And that's why these labels begin to fall apart. So parties like Reform and the Greens, they represent this new understanding of this new political division between the winners of globalization, that would be the Greens, and the losers of globalization, that would be Reform. So yeah.
Is there any discussion on, well, not that I've seen, but either in Reform, I'm going to say Reform, because I know there's Restore as well, but let's say Reform or the Greens, are they talking about digital ID at all? Are they talking about any of these issues?
So digital ID is not sort of something I work on explicitly, so I wouldn't know about...
So freedom of speech then, or freedom of discourse.
Yeah, free discourse. So Reform, obviously, they love to position themselves as being sort of pro-free speech.
Yeah.
They, as far as I understand it, have some really dreadful policies on protest.
Yeah.
Because they've seen the pro-Gaza protests, and they think like, oh yeah, but this isn't a legitimate protest. This isn't allowed, so we're against that. So that means that you can say that you're a free speecher all you want, but if you don't support the protest rights of everybody, then you don't support protest rights at all, and you are not a free speecher. And the Greens have been quite silent, actually, on as free speech issues, again, because free speech is still kind of coded as this right-wing issue, so they sort of stay away from it. They have they are more sympathetic towards protesters, for instance, for Palestinian causes. Sure. But they have also expressed some concerning ideas about protests on the right. So it's not. There is no at the moment there is no party that, at least from my perspective, is genuinely pro free speech as a kind of universal value. It's everybody thinks that they get to pick and choose when free speech is convenient.
It just seems like when we actually try to have free speech and free discourse, that society is generally better for it.
Yeah.
And there's going to be people who disagree on both sides, but the fact that we're moving into a more polarized world, and we can talk about that across the world. Obviously, it's happening in America, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in Israel. it's certainly happening here, but I'll just stick to the UK. It just seems like the UK is becoming more and more and more divided when we could just otherwise. I want to sort of go back to, I keep forgetting the name of because I keep wanting to call it the free speech, the free discourse.
The Oxford Society for Free Discourse.
Oxford Society for Free Discourse.
We can call it the Free Speech Society, that's fine.
Did you find that generally people were, and you said that yes, there was people sort of on the extremes who were like, this is horrible, or like, this is great, come with us. But did people generally, despite where they came from and their political perspective, did people sort of come together? Was there any time where you maybe invited someone on, like Douglas Murray, or someone maybe even more polarizing? I'm going to stick with the right, for example, where say people on the left came out of it going, okay, I didn't agree with everything he said, but I actually found some good points there. Was that ever?
That certainly happened. I think what was interesting about the types of people that came to the events was that it tended to be the types of people who obviously kind of loved arguing, loved debating. So there was a kind of a self-selection there happening already as well. But there were always really interesting discussions in the pub afterwards where it's like, I'm so glad I came to this event. I still can't stand anything about that speaker. I really hated every single point.
Sure.
But at least I was able to make that clear in the Q&A. So we did have some Q&As that were just kind of basic. It was incredibly critical, and that was very much the point. And I was sort of, I'm very happy that I was, even for a short time, able to create a space where that was possible. And I think lots of people came up to me, either kind of after events or just kind of generally just saying like, well, it's really interesting that you founded this, because I was initially quite skeptical because of the label of like, well, Free Speech Society, like what is that free discourse? But once I actually came to an event, I realized that it's just like, there's a lot of value in just chatting to people. And I also have to say, like, in terms of scale, we were nothing like the Oxford Union or anything like that. I mean, some of our events were really tiny.
They've been going for decades.
Centuries.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
So there's actually, it's a big misconception that the Oxford Union is kind of representative of like the Oxford debating scene in general. It's very much its own thing.
Right.
They're also not technically part of the university. They're like a separate entity.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So we were more representative in that most debating societies at that uni are much smaller in scale, and things like I was president of the History Society as well for a while. We did the same thing, but just kind of history related. So we'd invite like historians and things. But in terms of scale, I think largest event we hosted was maybe 150 or so people. Okay. Smallest one literally was 12.
Right.
So
that depended on the guests?
Yeah, we didn't always have guest speakers. So we had maybe 10 guest speakers in total, something like that. But we did do like weekly discussions. We had something called Chai and Chat, where we would all like have tea and then just like talk about like a topic. That was...
Is it still running now?
No, it's not. So COVID completely decimated the whole thing. That was actually quite sad. We hosted a remote event right around the time of the George Floyd murder, right at the height of summer 2020. Right. We wanted to kind of create a space where people could like speak openly, and I was very excited about it. And I waited on the Zoom chat for about half an hour.
It was a very controversial time.
It was, but I think I waited on the Zoom chat half an hour and nobody turned up, and I thought, okay, well, you know,
you just chat to yourself in your own brain.
Yeah, I was like, okay, well, I guess that's fine.
So was that where it ended? That was the last one.
Yeah, that was the last one.
Such a shame.
Yeah, it was a very kind of, I think it literally lasted for like 2 years. It was like sort of short, but like I think we got a lot done. I think we reached a lot of people. And even if there's somebody who just went to one event and left it with a sense of like, oh yeah, actually free speech is more than just triggering people online or being triggered and all of that type of stuff, I think that's valuable.
Yeah, one of my favorite, nobody ever talks about this because it's not a thing anymore, because people sort of sit in echo chambers, and that's partly to do with social media. But I think even if you don't want that sort of most wholesome idea of free speech, is like genuinely listening to what other people have to say and defending their right to say it famously, I think it's good to listen to people who disagree with you, because if you're so of the mindset that they won't change your opinion, at the very least what you can do is understand the arguments of the opposite side, and then you can strengthen your own viewpoints.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things I saw. I cannot remember the name of this woman, but there was a woman who recently went on television to debate It's a guy who is sort of running Palantir in the UK, because there's now the whole thing where Palantir is basically taking over the admin and technological side of the NHS, and they've got all of people's health data. And she was debating him on why this was a bad idea, basically. And I think the guy is, what's his name? It was the guy in Peaky Blinders and it was the genuine Oswald Mosley.
Oh, yeah.
And this guy who is the head of Palantir in the UK
That's right.
is like the grandson,
great-grandson,
great-grandson of Oswald Mosley,
Yeah.
which doesn't mean he's a fascist. It's just an interesting fact. But this woman went on to debate him, and she just sort of fell apart. And the thing that was really annoying was she was correct. I agree with the perspective that I don't think we should have some massive US company for £200 million coming in to take over the NHS.
Yeah.
But he basically made all these arguments that there's a bunch of disinformation about what Palantir is actually doing and what information they have access to and what they're doing with that information. And he was very clear and very well spoken and very calm the entire time. And she just kind of fell apart. It was a really interesting thing. Is like, people have to be not only correct, but they have to be educated. And I think one of the things that's happening more so, it's definitely happening on the right, but it's more so happening on the left, I think, is people have these ideas of what they think is right, and then they go on to debate these things versus someone on the right. There was recently a debate with Konstantin Kisin around mainly illegal immigration. It was about some other things as well. But I thought he came away from that the winner, if that is a thing, not really a thing. But I thought he came away making clearer points, but the left-wing person would just sort of argue left-wing points. I can't remember who it was, and it was an American guy and a YouTuber, but I'd never seen him before. And he would get a big applause from the audience because he just said something that everyone else agreed with.
Yeah.
But if you came out actually listening to who sort of was making stronger points in an argument, it was actually him. And this seems to be a problem that we're having more and more, not only like amongst people and amongst, say, left citizens, but in the government as well, where they can't actually argue the points that they're bringing in.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very much it's very much a skill. A lot of people, I think we might have talked about this before, but a lot of people go through media training, and it's genuinely something that it's a skill that you can learn. It's as a part of my role at Big Brother Watch is also to be a spokesperson, and media training is something that I do quite frequently, and it's something I'm still learning, and learning literally things like how to pitch your voice, how to know when to stop talking. That's one of my weaknesses there, and also how to bring your point across in a way that is persuasive to the other side. And what I find very interesting is that a lot of people in right-wing spaces are quite naturally interested in the idea of debating. It doesn't mean that they're all that they're all genuinely pro-free speechers and all of that stuff. Like I've described already, a lot of them are hypocrites. But there is a kind of a cultural sense that debating in and of itself is a value. And I think that a lot of people,
for the purpose of debating, I might add as well, because the whole thing about debating now is it seems to be the thing where people try to win an argument.
Yeah,
and a debate
exactly.
is not about winning an argument. A debate is about genuinely trying to persuade the other side of your opinions because they are the right ones, not just because they're your opinions.
Well, I mean that's what's interesting. Is I think that the right are they're much more open to looking at debating as something that's very competitive, and I think that the left often think that if they just make the points that are right, that idea itself will magically transfer into the consciousness of everybody around them. And I think that's a big mismatch, and that they both sides really enjoy debating, and they especially if you do a kind of job that's public facing, or you're on TV, obviously you're the type of person who enjoys conversations. But I think a lot of the time the right find it easier to enter into debate in a competitive way, which of course means that they do tend to be slightly more persuasive because they don't always rely on facts. They don't always rely on like exact figures. They often just kind of they go with an idea that stirs people. And I think something that holds people back on the right, but on the left, is that they're so particular about their various points that they want to make that they lose the general line of sight when it comes to their argument, or they lose people along the way because they're so obsessed with all the nuances that it just becomes this really technocratic thing, and things get lost.
Yeah, there's a thing, a good friend of mine dubbed it opinion theatre. If you go to the Edinburgh Fringe, basically you will see a variety of plays, and most of them are a very clever disguise for actually just people on the left telling you that they're good people. You can see a play where someone's in an ant costume, or someone's talking about climate change, or it's a dystopian Orwellian play about the future, and basically the play is not actually a drama being played out. You're not watching a character learn things and develop and become a better person, the sort of hero's journey, which is like the classic storytelling device. You're watching people basically tell you that they're a good person because they agree with all the right things and they have all these opinions. And that is most of what you will see in Edinburgh Fringe. So I don't really want to go back. I mean, I did it a couple of years ago and I don't really want to go back anymore. I want to go back and I just want to watch comedy because most of there's good plays and there's good performances and you can see a lot of fun things like physical theatre at the Fringe from like different international companies. That's one of the cool things about it. But particularly, and that's a big thing in the theatre world, I find now in London as well. So my partner and I, we went to a play. I won't say the name of the play. Actually, I won't say that. No, you know what? I'll say the name. It was at the National. I just won't say what the play was. It was a couple of years ago, and she was really excited because she's from Scotland. She'd never been to the National, and she's like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna like be in the National. I'm gonna see an actual play," because she'd seen National Theatre Live and all that stuff. And the play was essentially about people being stuck in a place together over the course of a few hours because there was like a storm outside, and you got people who were of differing opinions who would never spend the same time at a table together in a pub, suddenly stuck together to sort of like live out this storm that was happening outside.
It's a great premise.
It's a great premise. But basically what it ended up being was that there was a sort of basically a Tommy Robinson figure who came in, and then there was people who were obviously of a different persuasion, and essentially what the play told you at the end was that racists are racists and they're horrible people, and never, even in a situation where people can come together and find similarities, they're still horrible people and just never listen to anything they say, which I think is such a horrible point of view. Because even if I can't remember what the name of the organization was, but very famously in America, in like the 80s, there was like some sort of a black union or something that marched on behalf of the KKK or white nationalists.
The ACLU.
ACLU.
Yeah, so that was the ACLU who marched in favor of I think it was it was the ACLU. Now I'm doubting myself. But yeah,
I think it was the ACLU.
Yeah, they marched in favor of the freedom of speech rights of the KKK.
Yeah. Which you won't get that anymore.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I think with social media, people say the rise of social media these days. I think it's been 25 years. Like, for goodness sake, it's risen. Like it's here. It's fine. But when in the last sort of 2 decades or so, we've seen increasingly people being scared of getting rooted or stuck to an opinion forever. And that's also something that, ironically, like my work is on free speech, and I'm still nervous about saying some things on air or on TV because I think or like tweeting something because I think like, oh, what if this gets taken out of context, or what if this gets like misconstrued and then I'm labeled in a certain way?
Yeah, has your free speech training, has it done? I feel like it's one of those things where like you've got to go out and actually experience it, and you've just got to get better at doing that.
No, absolutely. Yeah, like it's when I did my very first media training session at Big Brother Watch, it was just me and my manager who was doing the training, and we did a trial radio interview about I think it was about protest rights, actually.
Right.
And I was trying to make some like really just like run-of-the-mill standard civil liberties point that was something along the lines of like, yeah, protest is important for everybody. And I just kept doubting myself. I was like, oh, am I phrasing it in the right way? What if this is what if this is wrong? What if it's taken out of context? And like I was literally like hired because of my free speech background, because I'm sort of confidence expressing views in a public space, and even I was like really in this training session I was sort of choking up because I was thinking like, what if this is going to get taken out of context?
Doubt everything you say.
And something that was really helpful actually is that my manager at the time, Matthew Feeney, he said, well, like, I know that you come from a university debating context and all of that, but remember the world is not dominated by second-year Oxford students. So the world is not dominated by people who have so much time that they're going to take everything out of context. And I think recognizing that obviously the loudest voices in spaces are often the most sort of open to debating and open to like smear campaigns and labeling and all of that stuff. But now when I try to when I do something that is public facing, I just try to picture who it is that I'm actually talking to. And most people in the world are not super tuned up on every single political issue. Most people in the world are just like my mother.
Yeah,
you know, she's a smart woman. She reads the news. She has a scroll on Instagram from time to time. But and she's kind of politically pretty neutral, kind of run of the mill. She doesn't have very strong opinions on stuff, but she's interested. And I think that if more people started to picture people like their mothers, or specifically my mother, because my mother's great,
Sure.
then I think we'd have a much more positive debating environment where it's people will be less on the defensive, and find it easier to just kind of express views, and have the confidence that most people engaging with these views are not the super loud minorities. They're this kind of silent, middle of the road majority who over the years have basically been taught that if they stick their head above the trenches, they'll be immediately shot, so they decide to stay silent.
Yeah. Is there a case to be made that more people need to be educated about this sort of stuff? I mean, we were talking a little bit about AI, and that people need to know more about what's happening in the world of AI, because it's happening so quickly and it's taking away jobs and it's doing all these things. I do know a lot of people who they get the occasional BBC alert on their phone and they feel like they know what the news is. I know other people who read the news and they feel like they know what they're talking about, but it turns out they don't really know what they're talking about, because the news is owned by certain people who try to give them a certain persuasion and a certain bias. And luckily, because I've got a lot of time on my hands, I feel like I read a lot of I feel like I'm reading information all the time. I feel like I'm constantly learning about things, and everything is constantly changing. So you can't spend 1 week learning about things and then take a break the next week. You have to constantly do it. So is there a case to be made that more people need to be educated about what's going on, particularly with like this under 16s ban, or do we need to find a way of educating or speaking to these people, like the people who are educated? I think we need to be the ones to find more ways to get the word out to people, which again is what your organization is doing.
Yeah, well, I think it's in an ideal world, everybody would carve out an extra week next to their already existing week to spend all the time reading all the information they possibly can.
Sure.
Of course, time doesn't work like that. So we can't expect people who have jobs that we might not find so interesting to learn all about the stuff that we do find interesting.
Sure.
In the same way that I can't be expected to know anything about like what's going on in the world of like marketing. I literally have no idea.
Yeah.
Besides where it overlaps with things like AI and like my kind of policy areas.
Yeah, my neighbor's big into cars. He runs these big international car
right,
shows.
yeah,
I'm
I have no idea.
I don't know, I don't care. I've been to a
Exactly.
couple. I really like it. It's fun to chat to the people for like the hour that I'm there, but I
Yeah.
don't want to go home and then like learn how engines work,
Yeah.
because it's just not my interest.
No, exactly. So the world is huge, and everything clicks together, and everything's relevant to everything. And that can be very overwhelming for people. But I think that, so rather than expecting people to actually gain the information for themselves, I think that we should raise awareness about the fact that the news is not all there is. And like you said, that the news is owned by a certain group of people or groups of people who all have interests, and that there's only so much time on a news segment. So just because something makes it onto the news, it does not mean that that's all that happened that day.
Have you ever had things taken out of context that you've said publicly?
Not yet. Thank
Okay.
goodness. Not yet. So
Exciting. There's
knock
always
on wood.
time. It will happen.
It absolutely, yeah, it will happen, and it's just going to be one of those things that I'm going to have to sort of deal with. But the good thing about at least being more public facing more often is that if I have one bad interview or one thing that goes badly, there's a record of stuff that I've said over a longer period of time.
I just don't even think people listen to that. So many people, all of the prime example I give is Jordan Peterson, and he always says that there's all these ideas about him, and people think they know who he is, but he's got a record of work and specifically lessons that he taught online. So people can go back and watch that stuff, but most people don't, or they don't have the time.
Yeah.
And so they watch that tiny little clip that they see on the news of people speaking for like 20 seconds,
Yeah.
and they go, "Oh, you're a horrible person."
Yeah.
There was a lovely man I interviewed, Emmanuel Ayula. He's a YouTuber, and he's a lovely, very well-spoken Black British man, but he's got an interesting perspective because he comes from a family of immigrants, but he is also concerned about the illegal immigration that is happening. And so I asked him when I was speaking to him, I was like, how do people critique you? And they see, 20 seconds that someone else has taken, because especially people don't realize on YouTube, you can take any, specifically shorts. It's a lot easier with shorts. You can take a short that people's done and you can do what's called remix it. And anyone can do this with any YouTube account. You don't need to be a creator or anything. And you can remix and take people's, so you get like podcasts that are really popular, and then people will remix them and add music on top of them. So it's a really good way for people, and probably a lot of bots with the dead internet, to get a lot of clicks and views. And it's horrible. It's a horrible situation because I was fascinated because he came from an immigrant background and came to to Britain, and I'm from an immigrant background as well. Like I immigrated to Britain, and so I find it interesting, but I still think there's a problem. But people will just go Uncle Tom. They just say Uncle Tom, and they don't listen to anything else he has to say. You just get classed, like labeled, which I think is a big problem.
Absolutely,
With free speech, like you can't label free speech. One of the things that I always say is you ask people on the right if they like England, and they're like, oh, I love England. You ask people on the left in London if they like England, and you just get that, oh, I don't know about England. England is a bit like, I don't know, St. George's Cross and all that. But then you go, oh, do you like London? And people go, oh my God, I love London. It's so diverse. And it's like, well, it's the same thing. But you just like, just because of that one label, people don't like it. It's a horrible thing. I imagine it will happen to you at some point.
Probably. I mean, it's something that I dealt with kind of informally in a sort of contained university bubble context. That was quite difficult. I actually sort of talking about that university context. I had somebody call me there was this really picture like a stereotypically posh white boy, floppy hair, Oxford second year.
Okay, very easy to picture.
Yeah. I had so someone like that called me a race traitor for being in favor of free speech.
Right.
And he spat at me and he called me a race traitor. And I just thought, like, at that point, that was almost like, it was so wild that it kind of became comical. So like I never let that get to me. But like it was like a wait, what?
Yeah. What was the context?
So the context for this was this was a big thing that happened very early on in the Free Speech Society when we founded it. So the Oxford Union had invited Steve Bannon, of all people, to speak.
I watched that one.
Yeah. So I mean, first of all, I think that was not a great call that they made. I don't think they should have invited him. However.
Is that not on par with what you were doing?
No, so Steve Bannon specifically, I think, he's not the type of person who we would have invited. I don't think he has very interesting things to say, to be honest.
Yeah, I thought there was some good and some bad in that thing.
Yeah. So however, so there were big protests outside of the Oxford Union, basically trying to get the union to cancel the event. Now we started a counter protest that basically we had.
I remember hearing about that.
Yeah. So you did.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I heard there was protests, and then there was another protest for people who were like, just have the conversation. Just have the conversation.
Oh, that's so great. So we got through to people. That's so exciting to know all these years later.
Yeah, it was years ago. And I remember, it was a very controversial chat with him. Yeah.
Winter of 2018 this was. Yeah. And essentially, like, none of the people in the counter protest liked him as a person, but we had so many people come up to us and join the protest kind of organically, saying like, look, I actually want to hear him speak because I have some questions. And there was this very, like, I will never forget this. There is this girl who came up to me. She was like half my height. I'm very tall, but she was super, super tiny. And she was a hijabi girl, and she had a little crumpled piece of paper in her hand. And she said, like, well, I have all these questions that I wrote that I want to ask Steve Bannon about the Muslim ban, because I think it was like her sister was in the US and she was getting married, and like an uncle from I forget where couldn't go over to the US to attend the wedding. It was like some kind of this Muslim ban policy that they were implementing at the time had a personal effect on her life. So this student was like, well, I have this piece of paper, but I'm too small to get through the crowd. And I thought that was like, that's an image that has stuck with me forever, because you had all these people protesting about like, don't let him speak, deplatform Steve Bannon, blah, blah. But here's somebody who genuinely wanted to basically just like sort of dig into him with these questions. And like, she was angry, right? She wasn't going to go and like politely ask. She was really, really angry. And she would have been a fantastic counter voice to have, because this event was filmed. So it's not the case that I'm not naive enough. I've never been naive enough to think that, but just by having a conversation, you can change someone's mind and everne's going to be.
But that's not what it's about.
No one's going to change somebody like Steve Bannon's mind. He's been in this for too long, right? But the minds that can be changed are the people who are watching the event and listening to the critical questions from students. I think it would have been just fantastic to have all those angry people in the room with a figure like Steve Bannon vocally saying, we don't like you.
Yeah.
Why are you like this? Yeah. Why are these policies
but
this?
You do get those people as well. And I think if I'm not mistaken, it did happen a couple of times at the Steve Bannon event where someone would, go up to ask a question and they basically just shouted at him and didn't say anything helpful. But that is an unhelpful thing to do. But to go in and be constructive and have an actual conversation, and you might change his mind in some things. I imagine because he's where he is. He's quite high up the food chain, and he knows a lot of what he's talking about, even if you don't agree with his viewpoints. He knows where he stands, but you might make him rethink how he's going about or enacting certain policies.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think that somebody at that kind of level is
Sure.
going to be sort of amenable to any kind of change at all. But that's
But just the fact that he knew that he was coming into a hostile environment to have that discussion with people.
Yeah.
Like, they invited him, but he also had to say yes to come in to a place that he knew would mainly disagree with him. But he was open to this suggestion of talking with people, because at the very least, what we have now is people not talking with each other, which is, we've now realized, is so much worse.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's there's a book by Nadine Strossen, who was, I believe, the former head of the ACLU back in maybe the 90s. She wrote a book all about free speech, and her big argument is that the only way to counter hate speech is more speech, and shutting down speech is just it's not a productive way to go about having healthy conversations in a democracy. And specifically when it comes to inviting controversial people, I think, like, of course, there is a kind of editorial decision that you have to make as a society, as a university debating society. Personally, I wouldn't have invited Bannon. I don't think that would have led to an interesting enough event to be worth it. I think we had interesting speakers who weren't as sort of famous and controversial, like that author Shinran that I was talking about.
I mean, you don't just want to invite people because they're controversial
No,
either.
exactly.
Like, if you're genuinely interested and they happen to be controversial, I think that's
that's different. But I think too many people invite people because they're famous or because they're controversial, and they think that it's going to be exciting because we're going to get lots of people in a room. I think that's irresponsible. But I think if you do invite somebody who is controversial and you know that they're controversial, then it is your responsibility to make sure that they get critiqued and that they have an opportunity to respond to that critique. And in this day and age, I think it's also your responsibility to make sure that that entire interaction is filmed, put online, and that the comments remain open.
Sure.
And that
let the comments be what they are.
let the comments be what they are. It's going to be messy. It's going to be
it's going to be mostly bots anyway.
Yeah, at this point, that's of course the difference from about 10 years ago when that whole thing happened.
I think the important thing to note is, like, from where we started the conversation with this under 16s ban and everything, I don't think you can live in a democracy if you don't have free speech.
Absolutely not.
I think it's not. There seems to be two proposed alternatives. There seems to be either free speech or what we have now, which is calling people terrorists and shutting down free speech. And I don't think that is a democracy. I think we're sliding into autocracy at that point. So if we're not allowing people to speak, and if we're not bringing intelligent ideas to the conversation, if we bring them on and then we just shout at them that they're wrong, that's essentially, if you give that person who's shouting power, that is what we have now. And you have a dictatorship, essentially, or something that is sliding into dictatorship. You don't have a version of democracy. You are sliding towards autocracy, and there is no middle ground. And I don't really see a way out of it at this current point in time.
I think the main thing that that we try to do at Big Brother Watch is to kind of raise people's awareness about the fact that actually the battle is not yet lost. It's not yet. We're not yet at that point where there's sort of a point of no return. And I think it can feel like that. I mean, I know that, like, every day I go into work and some other just like catastrophe to civil liberties just happened overnight.
Yeah, I wouldn't want your job.
It's just like we're just suddenly dealing with this now. It's like, oh, okay, right, okay, that's happening. But there are still organizations, there are still people who care. And I think that silent majority that I was talking about, most of them are still silent, and most of them, I think, often have this sense of like, oh, well, what can you do? But luckily enough, we do still live in enough of a democracy that people can vote and people can make their voices heard. And I think, especially in the UK is actually quite unique in a sort of in the European context, in that our civil society sector is actually quite big. It's very easy in Britain to found an organization and to actually have some influence in Westminster.
Sure.
This kind of non-profit lobbying is huge in Britain, and in the Netherlands, where I'm from, it's often quite hard to explain what I do for a job, because that whole sector doesn't really exist in as developed a way as it does here. So I'd really recommend that if people, first of all, people need to know about this. Second, they need to be made to care. And I think that's quite easy, because I think most people do care. And third of all, people need to be made aware that there is still something that they can do. And if it's not organizing something themselves, it's supporting groups who do stand up for rights. Please support Big Brother Watch. You can see our website, bigbrotherwatch.org.uk. And even if it's just things like engaging with organizations like ours on social media, taking 5 minutes of your commute to listen to a short podcast about issues, all of this stuff can have a cumulative effect. It can cumulatively disrupt the kind of the current political sphere, and I think can really make a difference. So we're not too far gone, but it's very easy to think that we are, and I have to admit that quite often I also feel quite hopeless when it comes to things like this.
Yeah. So for example, we will sort of end shortly because I think I want to end on a sort of positive note. But I am curious, what are you going to practically go away and do? Like when we have limited access to knowing, like for example, what this under 16s ban entails. Do you have any more access than we do? Do you have access to speaking to politicians, or are you just reading the news and trying to figure it out like the rest of us?
So what's really, really interesting actually about Westminster is that all of these horrendous infringements on civil liberties that are happening are all publicly available. You can just go on the Parliament website. You can just find the right amendment. You can find the right text, and you can just read it for yourself. However, it's all written in legalese. The website is just an absolute nightmare to use. I'm 7-ish months into my job at Big Brother Watch now, and I'm still struggling with some parts of this bloody website. But technically, it's all out there in the open, and I think that's what makes it so scary. Is that the information is there. It's not like a lot of this isn't like shadowy secret conspiracy theory type stuff. It's just there.
It's buried in bureaucracy and it's difficult to find.
It's easy. It's easy enough to find. It's difficult to interpret. It's difficult to put together. There's nowhere that you can just Google like, okay, what's going on with the social media ban, and then see the exact amendments and a nice little timeline of what's happened in Parliament. You need to know how to use the website, but technically it's all out there. And so that's why I think that the audacity of a lot of this is what shocks me. The audacity that the sort of government has when it comes to taking away our civil liberties in full daylight and sort of just expecting that nobody's going to care. And there are organizations out there who do care. And I think that if more people did care, that would make it harder for the government to put these things in place. So what we try to do is we try to translate a lot of the legalese to real human English, so that people can actually understand it. I actually don't think that the news does a particularly good job of this.
No.
So like reporting is not something that we ever use at work.
There was a couple of people. Do you know Brett Weinstein?
Yeah.
He was talking about this the other day with his wife Heather Haying on their podcast and their YouTube channel, and they were saying, and I was actually thinking about this, and then they sort of talked about it, so it was fascinating. It's this idea that can you get a balanced perspective of the news if you read, like what a lot of people do is they'll read left-wing stuff and they'll read right-wing stuff, and they think that it's somewhere in the middle. And they came to the conclusion, and I think they're right, that no, that's not correct. You need to find out other sources, and you need to go to the source material, and you really need to think about this stuff on your own, and probably have a debate with people who disagree with you to really get a good idea of what's going on. Because the news doesn't matter how much you can read every single news article every single day, you still won't have a good sense of what's going on unless you go to other information, and people don't tend to know that.
I completely agree. I think a lot of the news leaves out facts, not for any kind of sinister purpose. I think it's just like there's just not enough space in the article, especially with the social media ban. This has been such a convoluted legal and legislative process that it's just inconvenient for a journalist to have to write it all down. And journalists also know that people aren't going to read through this giant list if they just want to get a general sense of what's going on. So actually what I would encourage people to do is I say, you can't save the world on your own. Find one topic that you're passionate about. Find one issue that you really care about. Find an NGO or an organization that works on that topic. Follow them. And follow sort of their narratives. And then often those organizations will then provide links or information to the source material. And so with Big Brother Watch, we upload all of our briefings that we send to Parliament. We upload them online on a research page of our website. And that's just one way in which we try to keep a sort of transparent log of what we've been up to in Parliament. But there are also lots of other organizations that work on totally different topics, animal rights, things like that, who do very similar kind of non-profit lobby work, who work in the same way that we do. So yeah, it's impossible for people to expect people to sort of do their own research on every topic under the sun, because then I think even if you don't have a job at all, there's just not enough time in the day.
Oh, I think it's why it's helpful that Big Brother Watch exists and other organizations like yours exist, because it sort of helps to know when you're concerned about something and you sort of feel powerless and you're like, well, what's the point? Like, the people in power are doing it. There's nothing I can do anyway. That there is actually someone somewhere in some sphere who's actually quite far along that path. And you can just sort of jump in and aid or be a part of them in whatever way you can.
Yeah, we try to keep quite an open line with our supporters as well. We often get emails coming in with people who are concerned about a particular issue or people who have seen something that they think is sort of odd or suspicious. And obviously, we, like I said, we're a team of 7 people, so we can't respond to everything. But we do frequently respond to supporters, and even if like a supporter wrote in recently about an issue that they were concerned about encryption, and it's responding to him has been on my to-do list for I think like 3 weeks now. But we have in the meantime started looking at encryption as a topic that we're more interested in the policy area. So, and that was partly because that supporter wrote in and said, like, look, here's what's going on. This is the research that I've done. I know you guys are interested in this topic. Like, what can you do? Please help. And we've started doing that. So there's lots of organizations like ours who are small and pack a punch and sort of we'll take on jobs way too big for us very happily.
Yeah, with a team of 7 people. Yeah, I want to sort of end by asking you how you switch off from this sort of a thing, you personally, because like it's so overwhelming and it's happening all the time, and you probably can't take a break because you, like you say, the next day there's something entirely different. So if you didn't do that thing yesterday, you now got this thing and the new thing today.
Yeah.
How are you able to switch off? Are you able to just relax and not think about it, or is it always ticking over in your mind?
Yeah, I try to. So at the moment, I live in Cambridge and I work in London. So I have just like an incredible commute 4 days a week. That's bit hellish.
You just power down on the train.
On the train, I just completely power down. I the way I see it is kind of like the area around the office is like our office is right opposite Westminster on the other side of the river.
Right.
When I'm in that area, that's when I'm thinking about all the things. But then when I leave the train from King's Cross and I go towards Cambridge and I see all the fields, I'm like, oh, there's no technology in these fields. Trees. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a cliche, but like touching grass, genuinely, just like going outside.
Yeah, I don't do it enough because obviously I live in central London, and we're sort of around nature quite literally because we're on a boat, but it's not quite the same thing. I think just like even going to a park, but even here you've got like cars and things that you hear. So occasionally getting out and just being in nature is just such a nice thing to do.
Something else I really like doing as well is just like reading historical fiction. I studied history, so I like to kind of I love reading like Russian fiction from the 19th century. It's just like a whole different world.
A good non-political read.
Yeah, I mean it's political in a way that is like not related to
completely different
our issues at the moment, right? Like at all. It's all just like like the time before the Tsar fell and the Russian Revolution and all that. So I think like that's at least there I know what happens. There's no unknowns. That's what I like about history actually, is that you study history and you get all the spoilers beforehand. There's no plot twists. There's just the story. You have the facts.
Yeah. Do you ever read that and then go, oh my God, we're going back? That sort of like thing of cyclical history.
Yeah.
You read Dostoevsky and you're like, oh God.
No, that does happen. In which case I switch to reading mangas or watching anime or just like
I love it.
Something set in a completely different universe entirely.
Which isn't always the most helpful thing either. You watch something like Attack on Titan and you can then see the similarities in there as well.
I really like a series called Natsume Yujincho. It's just about a high schooler who can see very friendly ghosts, and he hangs out in the Japanese countryside, and there's like very low stakes missions.
I don't know this one. I need to check it out.
It's really cute. Absolutely nothing of consequence happens.
Great.
There's very little plot.
I need more
it's very
of that.
pretty.
Right.
It's a great way to switch off.
Lovely. Okay. Can you please remind people one more time? Could you tell me about remind me one more time about the other organizations as well? You mentioned the Molly.
There's the Molly Rose Foundation.
Molly Rose Foundation.
Yeah. There's Internet Matters as well. And let's see, other so we don't work very closely with them because we don't agree on everything, but we do have some organizations that we work with very closely. Open Rights Group, actually, for those interested specifically in the kind of the more sort of like online civil liberties issues, they do fantastic work. Liberty and Amnesty are great on protest rights. There's Actually, I wonder if we actually have a list of organizations that we work with on our website. I
No, I
haven't
was just
checked
fascinated
recently.
because
Yeah.
it was only Liberty that I think you maybe mentioned on the radio, but you guys do such good promotion as well. So you were the only one I really heard about, and that really blew up around the time of digital ID.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I didn't know that many other organizations that were doing it. It was only this Molly versus the Machines that I recently
Yeah.
saw on Instagram, and I was like, okay, now I know about that as well. But it doesn't seem like there are organizations, but it doesn't seem like they're doing enough sort of promotion on their part to actually
Yeah.
get out to people.
Yeah,
So
I
it's
think
good to know where to go.
Our comms team is absolutely fantastic. We've got 2 people on our comms team, and they're really
pro. Yeah.
they're super pro. Initially, before I joined, I thought I would walk into the office and see a comms team of like 15 people, and then it was Abby and Erland just sitting at their computers doing the work of an entire team. They're incredible. I think to find out which organizations work on a certain topic, I think I would recommend that people, literally just Google it. Just Google like just a certain topic that you're concerned about, and then just see which type of organizations come up. A lot of people or organizations give quotes in the media, so that's a good way of finding out who's working on a certain issue. Okay. And I also think you can genuinely just reach out to organizations and say, "Hey, I really like your work. I'd like to support more organizations like yours. Who else is there?"
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazing. This has been lovely. This has been sort of lovely. It's sort of horrifying, but it's good to know that it's not over.
It's definitely not over. No, it's always nice chatting to people about this. And
this is your first podcast as well.
It is my first podcast. I listen to podcasts all the time, so it's really cool that I'm going to be on a podcast now.
Yeah. Well, I always do a little bit of research before I have people come on, and I was Googling your name and researching, and there's obviously stuff from Big Brother Watch, and then there's a bunch of other women who have your name on YouTube.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I was like, you were nowhere to be found, so it's exciting to finally have you on.
Yeah, no, exciting. Well, thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thanks very much.